The Great Depression, the financial housing crisis of 2008, and COVID-19 all have something in common. They were all so devastating and life-altering, but the big thing that they had in common was that people didn't know that they were coming. They didn't even know it was happening while it was actually happening. So no one was prepared for it. As investors, we're risking our money now for a better return later. But the flip side of that is that we could actually lose money and have less money later. When we're choosing which asset to invest our money in, the most intelligent and diligent investors are researching fully and making calculated decisions on which investment makes the most sense by weighing the risk versus the reward. That type of decision is one that weighs something called calculated risk, not just risk outright. True risk is not something that you get to have information about and then you get to weigh the pros and the cons and figure out if it's a risk worth taking. True risk is something that you know nothing about, that you can't even prepare for because you don't know what to prepare for, and it kind of just springs on you and now you have to deal with it. The Great Depression and COVID-19 took over entirely and there was nothing that many people could do about the situation. In 2024, we have an equally damaging epidemic occurring, and in this video I'm going to fill you in so you can prepare. I'm Nolan Gouveia. My students call me Professor G, and I made this channel to make investing simplified. Now, the Great Depression began in 1929 when, in a period of 10 weeks, stocks on the New York Stock Exchange lost 50% of their value. As stocks continued to fall during the early 1930s, businesses failed and unemployment rose dramatically. By 1932, 1 of every 4 workers was unemployed. Banks failed and life savings were lost, leaving many Americans hopeless. The biggest issue here was that they didn't know they were in the start of the Great Depression that would last more than a decade, beginning in 1929 and ending during World War II in 1941. So true risk is something negative and that you don't see coming. Harry Houdini was known in all the world as one of, if not the best escape artists by being able to escape the craziest things like being put in a straitjacket and being hung upside down, and also being locked in cages or trunks and finding a way out. He used to also invite the strongest man in the audience to come on stage and punch him in the stomach to show that he could withstand any punch. Well, one day Houdini was set to give a speech at a university and he was meeting with some of those students beforehand. One of the students really liked that trick and asked Houdini if he could punch him in the stomach. Houdini said yes, and right away the student started punching him in the stomach. And the thing was that at the time, Houdini was not ready for those punches. He didn't give himself a second to be able to flex and hold in that air so that the punches didn't hurt him. 1 week later, after those punches, Houdini was dead. The crazy near-death escapes that he was doing for his tricks didn't kill him, but what did kill him were some punches from a college student. And not just the punches from the college student, but the fact that he wasn't ready for those punches. In essence, he didn't see that coming fast enough to be able to prepare for it. And the same thing happens in investing. There's ways to mitigate this risk even if we don't see it coming, even if we don't know when it's going to happen. And this is one of the most important things that investors leave out. And this is honestly what I've seen with my private clients. I've met with over 250 private clients in the past 2 years, and more often than not, it's not necessarily that they picked a super bad investment, it's more so that they didn't set themselves up in a different way. To mitigate risk in investing, the absolute biggest way that you can do it is going to be to set yourself up with an emergency savings account. It's the least sexy thing that you could do, but it's something that's actually going to keep you safe if the worst is going to happen. Because the absolute worst isn't that the stock market crashes. The absolute worst could be that the stock market crashes, but also that the job market crashes and the economy crashes, and so you lose a job and you don't have income and the stock market has dropped, so you don't even have that money. Now you have no income and no money, and you don't want to pull what's left out of the stock market because it's at its lowest possible. So when you sell, you've obviously lost that money. So it's just a terrible situation in all. You don't want to have to touch your investment unless you decide that you want to. Now here at the beginning of 2024, I don't think that it's going to be a risk like that. There is something much bigger that I'm getting to in this video, but just in case, it's very, very smart for you to have an emergency savings. I suggest that you have at least 3 months worth of living expenses in an emergency savings account. I would highly recommend that you put that into a high yield savings account so that it's just getting you some extra interest and making you some free money, especially as interest rates are as high as they're probably going to be at this point. Once you have 3 months saved up, I'd highly recommend that you save up another 3 months and you try to get to your goal of at least 6 full months of living expenses in that emergency savings account. That'll give you so much peace of mind and get you ready for what's coming, probably near the end of 2024, but for sure in 2025. Mitigating that risk is going to be one of the best things you could ever do for yourself. But like I said, I don't think that's the biggest risk in 2024. To understand the biggest risk that we're facing right now in 2024, we need to go back to an era of 1950. After polling thousands of Americans on which is the best era in all of history that they would want to go back and live in, the overwhelming majority picked the 1950s. In the book Same as Ever by Morgan Housel, he writes about the 1950s and why it felt like the best era to live in and why that's important for us today, which leads to my biggest risk in 2024. What was different about the 1950s that made life so great? He writes, "The gap between you and the people around you wasn't that large. It created an era where it was easy to keep your expectations in check because few people in your circle lived much better than you did. Not only were people living comfortable lives, they were able to look around and see that they were living as comfortable lives as the people around them and that they're comparing themselves to. The lesser pay was fine because most people you knew were getting paid less too. Smaller homes was acceptable because everyone had smaller homes. It was the one modern era where there wasn't much social pressure to increase your expectations beyond your income. Being rich isn't objective. It's for sure subjective, and it's relative to those around you. This is clearly evident today with more than half of people who are making 6 figures still living paycheck to paycheck. And 30% of people making over $250,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck as well." Housel continues, "Social media today adds a new element in which everyone in the world can see the life cycles, often inflated, faked, and airbrushed, of other people. You compare yourself to your peers through a curated highlight reel of their lives where positives are embellished and negatives are hidden from view." Psychologist John Haidt says, "People don't really communicate on social media so much as they perform for one another." We look at all the cool cars and homes and stuff that people have and that they're flashing on social media, but we also see that this type of stuff brings so much attention to these people. We then ask ourselves, why don't we have that stuff? And we start to imagine what our life would be like if we did have that stuff. Then we go ahead and keep that at the front of our minds, and then we go out and we go get that stuff. Because nowadays it's easier than ever before to go out and buy things that you absolutely cannot afford. It's why credit card debt is at an all-time high, and why, like I mentioned before, people making a very solid income still can't get ahead. The biggest risk to you getting rich and the biggest hindrance to your investing in 2024 is you. Make the decision to break the chain and see those flashy things for exactly what they are. And to me, those things are just a prison cell. You'll be a slave to the things you buy, especially if you can't afford it. But even if you can, is it really worth it? Even if you have $10,000 sitting in your bank and you really want this designer watch, and you technically can afford it, if you make $50 an hour, you just work 200 hours or almost a full month of work days to afford that watch. Now, if something very expensive is worth it to you, then by all means, go for it. I'm not saying you can't have nice things. I am saying take a step back and actually think about what it is that you're buying and why. Are you just buying it because you're seeing that on social media? You see people flexing with their expensive watches or shoes or whatever, and you think that if you have that, that's going to give you that status or respect or whatever? Those types of highs from that purchase are very short-lived, and it's something that you'll continue to keep chasing, and with that, you're gonna lose a lot of money. Take some time to really reflect on what is most important to you in this world, and I can almost guarantee that it's not the things you have or want. Set your priorities straight and free yourself in a way that most people never will be able to. The thing that's always been the most valuable to me is my time, and being able to give that time to those that I love and to things that matter to me. So I've always invested with the idea and goal of overall time freedom, so I can go do what I want when I want and not have to be stuck going to work because I have to pay off a debt that I shouldn't have gotten in the first place. So the big risk in 2024 is all the noise that we're getting from all different media inputs, and we need to be smart and discern for ourselves what's going to be the most important and where we're going to spend our money. You do that, and I promise you that's going to get you ahead much faster than trying to pick between this ETF versus that ETF. To see more about the book that I talked about in this video, plus 14 other books that I definitely recommend for 2024, watch this video. And then to learn what to invest in to supercharge your wealth for 2024, this is the video you're going to want to watch for that.